From the Arizona Daily Star and Tucson.com, this is the Wildcast.
Thank you for listening to the Wildcast podcast. I'm Justin Spears here with Michael Lev. We'll be talking all things Arizona Wildcats football now that Arizona is going to the postseason. Alamo Bowl, Holiday Bowl, what bowl game will Arizona go to? We'll find out this weekend on Sunday during the bowl selection show. We'll be talking about the Territorial Cup, the latest updates regarding the Arizona Wildcats football program. Before we get into the details, just want to tell you guys that we greatly appreciate all the support this regular season for our podcast, the mailbag questions that you've submitted all season long. We got a boatload for this week. We just can't thank you guys enough from the bottom of our hearts. We do greatly appreciate your being able to listen, subscribing, commenting. If you haven't yet, go to the Wildcast wherever you get your podcast and hit that subscribe button. And if you're an Apple Podcast user, we would greatly appreciate it if you gave us a 5-star review and left us a comment. Let us know what you think about the podcast and maybe some things that we can work on. Constructive criticism is always the best. We're trying to get this podcast to grow more and get better. But Lev, man, we were in Phoenix over the weekend watching Arizona put an end to their regular season. And I got to say, Lev, when we were talking at the start of the season about Arizona's win total at the end of the season, I thought 9 might have been maybe a little bit far-fetched. And then the start of the season came, and you saw Colorado win a couple of games. You saw Washington State have that hot start, and then it went from, man, Arizona's a really good team, but where are they going to get their wins? How are they going to become bowl eligible? And now here we are in late November. Not only are the Wildcats going bowling, but they're 9-3, the most wins in a season since 2014. Just a handful of teams have been able to win 9 games in a season in program history, and how they were able to end the regular season with a 36-point beatdown over ASU. This team is the real deal, and Jed Fish has turned around this Arizona football program from the doormat of the Pac-12 to now winners, and a team that's third in the conference standings. Lev, the Pac-12 media poll at the start of the year had the Wildcats at 8th. I'm curious, where did you rank Arizona going into this season?
Yeah, I don't think I voted for that this year. I didn't participate in that poll. I was on vacation at the time. I had them going 7-5, which I thought was, kind of the next step in their progression. If you look at the Vegas win totals heading into the year, 5.5. If you're unlucky, you cash that ticket. And then some if you bet the over. I thought that total was a little bit low, and that people were underestimating the Wildcats. The one thing we didn't know coming into the year was, like, how would this defense come together? Yeah. Right? They still had a lot of young guys who were relatively unproven. They were bringing in, several additions through the transfer portal, and a lot of them were unproven too. Like Bill Norton barely played at Georgia. We didn't know if he was going to be good. Tyler Manoa, his career had kind of gone in a weird direction at UCLA. He was moved to the offensive line. Martell Irby, no idea what you're going to get out of him after he, retired from football, basically. Johnny Nansen, his first year wasn't great. So what were you going to get out of him? That was the biggest change in the team. Obviously, they had a quarterback change at midseason because of an injury situation, and Noah Fafita really took that job and ran with it. We did think that guys like Tataroa McMillan would blow up this year, which he did in a big way. But I understand why there was some skepticism heading in to the season.
I don't even think it was skepticism. I just think that
realism.
You look at the other teams in the Pac-12 too. The league is from top to bottom littered with great quarterbacks. And you look at the leaders of the teams that were ranked ahead of Arizona, and they had elite quarterback play. And again, like Lev, I think that the questions regarding Arizona on the other side of the ball led to a lot of people maybe putting the Wildcats towards the bottom half of the Pac-12. But lo and behold, they're a top half team in this conference.
They're the number 3 team.
Yeah.
They're sole possession of third place, 7-2 in the conference, likely going to the Alamo Bowl. We'll find out officially on Sunday. And people thought that this wasn't possible, not necessarily because Arizona wasn't a team on the upswing, but because the Pac-12 was so good. And I think, they exposed Washington State. That's what started this winning streak. And they had a bye week. And they got really good Oregon State team at home, which I think helped a lot. And they were able to escape with a victory in that game. Some questionable coaching decisions in that one. Jonathan Smith going for that fake field goal at halftime. and they ended up with no points, and they ended up losing by 3. I think they exposed UCLA a little bit. UCLA was a little bit overrated. UCLA had quarterback issues. Utah had quarterback issues, although Bryson Barnes played really well when he was here, but they didn't have Cam Rising the whole season.
Yep.
Arizona having a really good plan B at quarterback, I think helped them out a lot. But I don't know. There was just no way to see this coming. I know Jedd Fisch said that he liked his team. Like, he really liked his team in training camp. But 9-3? I mean, as he said, that's only happened a handful of times in school history.
Yeah, 7 times.
Yeah. And they have a chance to win 10, which has only happened, twice? Mm-hmm. In forever? I mean, they did it in 1998 and 2014.
Yep.
Right? So this is, almost unprecedented territory. And of course, when this happens, the biggest talking point today and this week until something happens is, what is going to be the status of Jedd Fisch?
Yeah.
Is Jedd Fisch going to remain Arizona's coach? Can this school do right by him and pay him what he deserves? And maybe that's a tough thing for people to swallow when they hear about the budget issues that the school has, but this is a separate issue.
Yeah.
Athletic department operates on its own. Okay? And football and men's basketball are the biggest revenue drivers. And if you want to be really good at those sports and get butts in the seats and sponsorship deals and all those things, you have to pay head coaches who are successful. Mm-hmm. And Jedd Fisch is killing it right now. He's hot. I know there's really no college job currently open that probably would appeal to him or that you'd view as better than Arizona, but the NFL's out there too.
Yeah.
I just saw Peter Schrager, NFL Insider, Good Morning Football, tweet that he's been talked about in NFL circles. I mean, Jedd Fisch, head coach of the Carolina Panthers, Chicago Bears,
Los Angeles Chargers.
I mean, it's not that crazy.
Yeah.
It really is not that crazy. I mean, these NFL teams, they hired Cliff Kingsbury, right, who never did squat at Texas Tech, frankly, to be a head coach. Jedd Fisch, with all the NFL experience he has, I'd say he's better qualified than Cliff Kingsbury. So this
Absolutely.
Dave Hickey's got his work cut out for him. Like, they've got to come up with a deal, with a number that's going to make Jedd happy, because I don't think he wants to leave. Like, he knows he's got a good thing going here. He's got a great team that's going to only be better next year in a winnable league. We've talked about this before on the podcast. We talked about it in our post-game video. I mean, like, they can win the Big 12 next year. They can go to the playoff next year. Like,
it expands to 12. I mean, heck, if it was
in play this year, they'd be in those discussions for sure.
Yeah.
Right?
Because the rankings come out on Tuesday.
They were already 15th. They'll be 14th or 13th. So right there, like right on the cusp. So this is currently a great spot. But the market is the market. And whether he wants to leave or not, he might get an offer that he can't refuse. So big storyline to follow here over the next week or so, or maybe longer.
And why is Jedd Fisch one of the hottest coaches in football right now? Let's look at the streak that Arizona has been on to end the regular season. They've always said that the turning point of the season was the USC game when they lost in triple overtime. Gunnar Maldonado said that he truly felt like this program had turned a corner when they went on the road and just thumped Washington State by 38 points. He felt like that was a game where, they knew that they were good, but to go out on the road and beat a ranked team by that many points, that showed them
complete and utter domination.
Okay, we're a pretty good team. And then Arizona, you could just see the confidence and how they carried themselves from that game on. And the Wildcats have been a really good team. And I was looking at this, Lev. We talked about this in the podcast last week, or maybe in our post-game video, about how year 3 under Jed Fish, the Wildcats should be in this win little phase. Like, you've got a winning record, but you're also, winning games by 1 possession. Arizona has 6 wins this year by 2 or more possessions. Think about that. They had 2 combined in his first 2 years as head coach, and that doesn't even include the 7-point win against Cal to go 1-11 in 2021. But you got 6 wins this season by at least more than 8 points. This team is not only winning games, but they're doing it in dominant fashion. And also, I think the last 2 games combined to end the season between Utah and ASU, if I'm not mistaken, is that 101-41? Arizona outscored their opponents, right? So they're going out and just kicking ass right now.
Yeah.
And I was really wondering how this team would look going into this Territorial Cup game, because it's a rivalry game. Records are really thrown out the window. You're not playing for a Pac-12 championship, and they just came out and dominated ASU. And I understand that the Sun Devils are dealing with injuries. They're a rebuilding program. They're not at a position where Arizona's at right now. But to go up to Tempe and put up that many points, put up 59 points, the most points you've scored in Territorial Cup games since 1946, this Arizona team is flying high right now. And
could have had more through a pick at the 5-yard line.
Could have more. And this is why Jed Fish is looked at as, okay, if this guy can turn Arizona from 1-11 in the laughingstock of FBS, imagine what he could do with our program, where we have money and all sorts of other resources that maybe Arizona doesn't have.
Yep. Great culture builder, roster builder, came in with a plan, has executed that plan. 2022 recruiting class, top 25 in the country, amid a 1-11 season. Now, it's not all Jed, obviously, but it's his assistant coaches, his staff. I'm sure he'd give plenty of credit to all of them, but he's the leader, He's the boss. He's the one who's putting setting the wheels in motion for all of this, and he's kicked butt.
Yeah.
In a place that was, we've talked about it many times. It was dark. There was a big black cloud hanging over this program. Losing 70-7. Then they lost to. With Jed as coach, they lost to NAU. I think you brought this up. Do you think that's worse?
I think it's worse. Like losing to FCS little brother for the first time since 1932. That was awful. But again, like 20-game losing streak, losing to NAU, and then just in a 2-year span. Realistically, I emphasize this fact every single week. I feel like whenever we come on this podcast, they're 9-3, but 3 of those losses, or all 3 of those losses, are by combined 16 points. 2 overtime games. Really, we could be looking at Arizona being 11-1. And we were talking about the CFP picture. Heck, they could be in the CFP picture this year if they were able to pull out those.
It's a crowded picture,
sure,
to be sure. But I would say the only game and the Washington game was a 1-score game at the end, but Washington was in control of that game, and Arizona was trailing throughout, and they needed, a touchdown late to make it a 1-score game. Then they needed to recover an onside kick, which they did not get. But they easily should have beaten Mississippi State. Bunch of turnovers in that game, and even still, we're right there in overtime, an inch away from getting a first down. And they easily could have beaten USC, if not for Caleb Williams doing Caleb Williams things, And Jed could have gone for 2 in that game and ended it right there if they had converted, which there's no guarantee that they would have. But great, unbelievable season, really incredible. And so so what's next?
Alamo
where do you take it from here? Yeah, probably the Alamo Bowl.
Yeah.
Right. That's the number 3 in the pecking order if you include the CFP and the New Year's Six as the top two. Holiday, I think, is still in play probably. Vegas is still in play, but they've earned their way into the Alamo Bowl against, going up against someone like Oklahoma. Outgoing Big 12 against incoming Big 12.
Love it.
In Texas.
Sounds
good to me, right?
College football at its finest. Before we get to the mailbag, Lev, just overall thoughts on what happened on Saturday. I feel like we're kind of burying all of that, but it was a pretty historic day for a number of reasons.
It really was. I mean, you could just go on and you could just write out an entire story that's just a list of all the records that were set in that game. I mean, one thing that stands out to me was they had a little trouble defensively at the beginning. Jalen Conyers, who's like a 270-pound tight end, playing as a Wildcat quarterback, Scadaboo back there as well. Two really tough guys to bring down. So that was a little, there was a little like, ooh, man, maybe this is going to work for ASU. And then it didn't really work very much after that. They made some adjustments. They figured things out. I thought the defensive backs, again, had a really good game, even in the run support on the perimeter. Made the adjustments that they needed to make, and I think it was 8 straight possessions where they didn't score, and 3 of those ended in turnovers. And passing-wise, Arizona just did whatever it wanted. Very much like Oregon the previous week. Whatever they wanted to do, no matter what down it was, no matter how many yards they needed. Noah's dropping back, and he's finding Cowing, he's finding McMillan, he's finding McLaughlin.
What did you know? How many points ASU got outscored in the first half?
80-7.
Wow.
Over the last 2 first halves in their building.
That's crazy.
In their own building. Yeah, that's really bad. Needless to say. I mean, 42-0, and was it 38-7 at the half this last game. So, yeah, I mean, those were some of the things that stood out to me. I mean, I had written about Gunnar Maldonado and Dalton Johnson the previous week, so I wasn't going to write about them again. But, man, those guys, that position, so improved over the course of the season. Big question mark going into the season. Not a question mark now at all.
And they have a good problem, too, because the guys that are behind them, like Genesis Smith, they were raving about this kid in spring ball and preseason training camp. And we thought, hey, maybe halfway point of the season, maybe they make that transition from one of these older guys to Genesis Smith. And now we're looking at, hey, Genesis may start in his 3rd year. I mean, he's a really good player, don't get me wrong, but the play by Gunnar Maldonado and Dalton Johnson, especially in this second half of the season, this is a really good tandem that Arizona has in that secondary.
Yeah, I've brought up this question, and it's sort of impossible to answer, but is there a better coached unit in college football than Arizona's secondary? When you've got Chuck Cecil, former NFL defensive coordinator and NFL player. You've got Dwayne Aquina, one of the best defensive minds of the last 30 years. Has had, I think, 3 Thorpe winners under his watch. And you've got Coach Richardson coaching up the corners, who also has some good credentials. But those guys in the secondary are getting coached up in a major, major way. Yeah. By 3 really, really good coaches, and it shows out there. I mean, it shows the improvement over the course of the season from Gunnar Maldonado and Dalton Johnson. Both had interceptions. We're recording this before the official Pac-12 awards come out. I don't think Gunnar's going to get Defensive Player of the Week. Someone's going to edge him out. I can't remember. I think Stanford had an edge. Not Stanford. Sorry. Cal had an edge rusher who had a kind of bigger numbers. And an upset. Like Arizona was expected to win. Cal wasn't necessarily expected to win, although we all took Cal with the points. That was as obvious as could be.
But Gunnar had a forced fumble and a pick.
I know, forced fumble, pick, 10 tackles, had an absolutely great game. Dalton had 2 tackles for loss, had an interception. Traden Stukes, steady as ever, had 6 tackles, had a TFL. It's been a, sum of the parts, or whole greater than the sum of the parts kind of defense this year. No star players really, and I mean, unless you want to put Jacob Manu in that class. I don't know if he's ended up as the leader in the Pac-12 in tackles or not. He was right. He was up there and competing for that at the end of the season. But team effort all around on that side of the ball.
And then on the offensive side of the ball, Noah Fafita set a school record, 527 passing yards.
Not just the Territorial Cup, any game.
Yep.
in U of A history.
And that includes a guy who won a Super Bowl, right? Nick Foles. So Noah Fafita put up insane numbers. Tetairoa McMillan, his favorite target, had 11 catches for 266 yards. Second most catches by an Arizona Wildcat in a football game. And that is also a Territorial Cup record. He's the only receiver in the rivalry history to have over 200 receiving yards in a game. Darrell Robinson, I think, had 199 in 2011 for ASU. So just unbelievable performance by T-Mac, Noah Fafita. I voted T-Mac to win MVP of the Territorial Cup, and I immediately regret my pick. But I mean, you could have made
flip a coin.
You could have made an argument for T-Mac, but the throws that Noah made, and the one that I always go back and I'm just amazed by, is it was, I think, maybe the first or the second touchdown, the one to Tanner McLaughlin, who also set a record, most all-time receptions by an Arizona tight end, passing Rob Gronkowski. Big tip of the cap to the other T-Mac for Arizona.
You may have heard of him, yep.
Who also is a Wildcat who won Super Bowls. But the play that Tanner McLaughlin, it was a screen pass.
Yeah, and I know what
the way that Noah was able to kind of like bend his arm and
because there was a rusher right in his face, and it was a screen to the side, so he had to basically like kind of duck under and throw sidearm.
Those plays right there, I'm like, okay.
He did that a bunch in this game. There were several occasions where they got pressure, and he had to avoid, reset. He's got a nice little sort of duck under move.
Yeah.
He's not the tallest guy, and what ends up happening is the defender just kind of scrapes his shoulder, and Noah's able to reset his feet and make a good throw. He was on the Bear Down podcast. I was listening to it as I was driving up the other day, the one that the U of A puts out, and I think his second favorite sport is golf. You golfed with him, right?
Yes, sir.
At your event.
Spear Summer Classic.
Earlier this year. He's never mentioned playing baseball, but every time I watch him, I'm like, this dude had to have been a shortstop at some point in his life. Just the way his arm works, the way he's able to contort his body, throw sidearm, like, I don't know. He should have played baseball at some point in time, and if he didn't, it's a tragedy. By the way, the leading tackler in the Pac-12 is Easton Mascarenas-Arnold of Oregon State with 107. Jacob Manu, 106. So right there, and if you count, whatever they do in the bowl games as part of the statistical profile, then he still has a chance to lead the league by season's end.
Last Wildcat to do that, I believe, was
Colin Schooler.
Was it Colin Schooler?
I think.
Or was it Scooby Wright?
Or was it Scooby?
I think Colin Schooler might be the last one to have over 100.
Okay.
But I don't think Schooler led the conference in tackles. We'll double check on that. We don't have that.
Colin Schooler's my boy, so
your boy.
I'm always going to vouch for him.
Okay, let's get into some mailbag questions. Yeah. Lev has a few from his, I believe, Friday mailbag.
I got some
that puts
since
every
then
week.
too. Yeah.
Okay.
Let's start with this, okay? Because it dovetails with what we've been talking about. John Viator, Fish regarding staying in Tucson said, "It sounds good to me. Is Jed Fish on the precipice of becoming Arizona's next Lute Olson, and are jobs with that type of stability and stature even coveted in this day and age?" And then there's a follow-up from someone called this guy is Big 16 Count of Arizona. Okay. Anyway, I don't know what that name's all about, but he said, he can do what Tomey and Olsen did, or leave like Larry Smith did, and get fired in a few years. How many coaches that left Arizona went on to leave a, quote, legacy somewhere else?
Larry Smith was the last Arizona football coach to leave the program.
Like on his own volition?
On his own. Every other coach since then has been fired. And Larry Smith, when he was at USC, I don't recall ever hearing USC having this great era under Larry Smith. I know that he coached the Robo QB, Marinovich. That's the only part of the USC era I know about with Larry Smith.
He went. Here's his records at USC from 1987 to 1992: 8-4, 10-2, 9-2-1, 8-4-1, 3-8, 6-5-1. Here's the thing, okay? If you go somewhere else, if you go to USC, let's say, the expectations are different.
Yeah.
Like, they are really different than they are here. You do not have to go 10-2, 11-1 here every year to be deemed a success. You can have some down years where you go 6-6 or 7-5. If you're in that 7-9 win range on the regular, you're a superstar, right? And obviously everybody wants the team to win as much as they possibly can, but fans are not going to get on your case at Arizona if you go 7-5 or 8-4.
Yeah.
And if that's viewed as a quote unquote down year, that's just fine. It's okay. It's not great. It's not what anyone wants, but it's okay. If you do that at USC a couple times in a row, you're out.
Yeah.
Or do that at Texas A&M. It's not like Jimbo Fisher was bad at Texas A&M, but they want to win national championships.
Yeah.
And maybe Jed Fish is capable of doing that. But I don't know. Is there another coach who's left here on their own in any sport and establish a legacy? I think Jay Johnson is probably on the way to doing that. He's already won a national championship in baseball at LSU, and he's relatively young, and he's not going to stop winning. So maybe that's one, but I don't know. I don't know of another.
Like leaving wise, I think my colleague Greg Hansen, or our colleague Greg Hansen, wrote about, I think maybe Tara Vanderveer.
It's funny you said my colleague.
That's
like when my son says my mom.
My mom.
I'm like,
I do that all the time with my brother. I'm like, yeah, my mom was telling me. I'm like, wait a second, we share the same mom. How could I? Duh.
Just mom. Yes.
But I think our colleague Greg Hansen, the columnist, wrote about Tara Vanderveer at Stanford, nearly coming to Arizona, but decided to go to Stanford or stay at Stanford, one of the two. But that's not what you were asking regarding a coach that was at the University of Arizona and then left. I can't recall one that just
from one head coaching position to another.
Yeah.
There might have been people who were on staffs as assistants who went on to bigger and better things.
The guy at Tennessee, Heupel.
Oh, Josh Heupel.
Yeah. Josh Heupel. Yeah.
He's
I
don't
an
know.
Arizona guy.
Yeah, but is that a legacy?
No.
No.
Yeah, that's tough, man.
But does anyone do that anymore? I don't know. We may be past the days of there being those Lute Olson types or Dick Tomey types. 10 years might be about the most you can stay at any one place before the message doesn't resonate as much anymore,
Maybe Jonathan Smith could have been that guy if the Pac-12 didn't fall apart.
Yeah, that's a raw deal for Oregon State, man.
I feel bad.
Really tough. I don't know. I guess it boils down to, what does Jed Fish really want? Maybe that'd be a good question to ask him at the press conference today. We'll see.
Got any more mailbag
questions? Go for it.
Okay. So can you guys give us occasional mailbags throughout the offseason? Sometimes things happen, and I'd like to hear your guys' take on that. That's from Joseph52. Yes, of course, Joseph. Especially for our guy, Joseph. He's been submitting questions every single week, and we appreciate that, my man. Someone asked, this comes from Super Looper AZ. What's the biggest difference for you two as journalists in covering a winning team versus a losing team from a media perspective? That is a really good question. I will say this. Covering a winning team has been a little bit more entertaining than the 2021 season. Lev, you can talk about that since you were on the beat at that time. This is my first year on the beat, and I kind of lucked out. This is a really good year to start covering Arizona football on the beat. But the one thing I will say is that now we've gotten to a point where Arizona's so good. Storylines are coming in left and right regarding contract negotiations and bowl games and Pac-12 Players of the Week, all that stuff, rankings, etc. But man, I asked you this, Lev. I wrote a story about how great T-Mac is and how talented and gifted he is, and then he comes up a few days later and puts up 266 yards of receiving yards, and I'm like, how can I write about T-Mac more? How can I elaborate on the brilliance that is Tetairoa McMillan? That's the only down part of covering a team that's doing so well. Outside of that, I think I would take covering a 9-3 team versus a 1-11 team. That's just my opinion.
It's a lot more fun. And I wrote about this last year around Thanksgiving. I wrote a column saying I was thankful that Arizona, no, it was 2 years ago, sorry. 2 years ago, I wrote that I was thankful that Arizona ended its losing streak because it just gets old after a while. Like, you have to ask the same sort of awkward questions after every single game. And the players aren't happy, the coaches aren't happy. Like, no one wants to talk about losing all the freaking time, right? So to me, it's like the personal interactions are way better, when the team is doing well versus when they're not. And I don't know if I've talked about this on the podcast, but I actually wrote like the same lead twice. It was something to the effect of just when you thought things couldn't get any worse. Like, I wrote the same lead twice during the course of that 20-game losing streak.
Wow.
My wife was like, didn't you write this before? I'm like, did I? So it gets old.
Yeah.
Right? And hey, when they're winning and guys are doing well, there's any number of stories that you can explore, And with T-Mac specifically, like, how can you come up with a new story? We haven't talked to T-Mac all season, I don't think.
Yeah.
So hearing from the man himself would be a new angle. And I'm hopeful that there will be some sort of like media day that they have leading into the bowl where we get a chance to talk to a lot of these guys that we haven't talked to all season.
Another question coming in. This one is from WSU Golfer 1. John asks, is there another 2022 type class on the horizon? Curious to see how they use the portal again this year. Does number 71 move to left tackle next season? He's talking about big Jonah Savainea.
You can go ahead and handle the first part. I'll handle the offensive line movement part.
Recruiting-wise, the Wildcats are expected to have, I believe, another top 40 class coming in for 2024, or maybe they're just outside of the top 40. They have some very impressive prospects coming in. Damon Williams, a little bit undersized, but very athletic and has got a rocket arm. Kind of sounds familiar, right? Sounds like Noah Fafita a little bit. When I watch Damon Williams play, he kind of reminds me a little bit of Bryce Young, who's now the quarterback of the Carolina Panthers, former Alabama quarterback, Heisman Trophy winner, undersized, uber athletic, and just a really good quarterback. And he's the top offensive player in the state of Arizona. The other in-state guys like Adam Muhammad, the running back at Glendale Apollo, absolute beast, a do-everything guy. We saw Jordan Washington from Long Beach play in person when we went to go cover the Arizona USC game, and he accounted for 5 touchdowns, and I'm pretty sure did it on like 8 carries. It's every single time he touched the ball, it felt like he was finding the end zone. Arizona has some dudes coming in for 2024, but the cool thing about Arizona in the position that they're in right now is that they have really talented recruits coming in. And that, by the way, that recruiting class is also, according to 24/7 Sports, number 4 in the Big 12. But all these guys that we've been raving about at the start of the podcast, they're all coming back. So even if they have really good high school recruits coming in or transfer portal guys, they're going to have a bunch of guys returning, and Arizona's going to have a whole bunch of depth for next season. Now, regarding the left tackle position, TBD. I mean, I would imagine that probably Raymond Polito.
That's what I think too.
Probably.
Yeah. I don't think you want to move Jonah Savainea a second time, right? They've already moved him from guard to tackle. I think right tackle is a good spot for him. I think in the NFL, guard might be the best position for him ultimately, but no need to rock the boat. I think Polito's that guy. They brought him in for that purpose. He's got the size and athleticism. I go back to that screen pass against Utah where he's like flying downfield just as fast as Michael Wiley was. Had nobody to block on the play, but you saw the athleticism right there. And the other day when Jordan Morgan was talking about just that kid is huge. I mean, Jordan Morgan is a large human being. If he says somebody's huge, then he really is. I got one here for you.
Okay.
This is Brian Parker at Brian_Parker9. This team can be top 10 next year. Noah is obviously the starter and only a sophomore in 2024. How do you convince the QB backups and high school commits to stay with us? Obviously at the quarterback position.
Well, you pretty much just get him in the pipeline. And it's like, hey, this is our plan right now. And Noah Fafita is the guy. But once Noah's time is done at Arizona, then we're going to roll the ball out, and you can go out there and compete. Brandon Dorman, I'm sure, is itching to take over as the starting quarterback, and he's a little bit different than all the other Arizona quarterbacks. He's larger, just a large human being compared to Noah Fafita and the other guys. But he's still a really good quarterback who is the Colorado State Player of the Year and a talented player that Arizona is very high on. I believe he was also a 4-star prospect. But the thing about college football is that you have to understand that this is a long process. This is not like basketball to where you can come in and start as a freshman. Now, there are certain prospects that can come in and start immediately, like Jonas Savianea was one of them guys. Teto O'Rourke McMillan was another one. But if you're a good quarterback, you probably would want to go into a situation to where maybe you can understudy some other guys, learn the offense, become accustomed to the college football pace and all of that. So I think that's probably the message that Arizona has, and I think they just want to keep guys in the pipeline so that way when one guy leaves, they can plug in the other guy and just keep it rolling. Yeah,
a couple points. One, the way things are now with the transfer portal, in all likelihood, someone's going to transfer. Whether that's Braden Dorman or Damon Williams or Noah Fafita for his last year of college, someone will transfer. It's just the math. The odds are guys want to play. You can only play one quarterback at a time. Whatever you think the quarterback room looks like, it'll probably change. Second thing I would say is, hey, Braden Dorman next year or Damon Williams, whoever the number 2 quarterback is, you're one play away. Noah Fafita going into this season, we didn't think he was going to play.
Yeah.
Sure didn't look like it.
That's a good point.
And then he did, and he took the job, and he ran with it, and he hasn't given it up since. So things can change, So you want to be ready, and whatever. I would just never make assumptions, Yep.
Okay, so we have a bunch more mailbag questions.
We do.
I think we're going to hold off until later on in the week. We'll answer the rest of these
Let's
mailbag
do another
questions.
One. Yeah.
We'll do another podcast. We'll also look into the Pac-12 championship game in Las Vegas between the Oregon Ducks and the Washington Huskies. So if you didn't hear your question get answered, don't worry. We got you later on in the week. And
I got some good ones here too, so yeah.
Keep them coming, guys. We appreciate them. All right, that'll do it for this episode of the Wildcast. Subscribe, rate, and comment the Wildcast wherever you get your podcasts, and also find coverage of Arizona Wildcats football and basketball on Tucson.com and the Wildcaster app.